Hi, everyone. I'm Lana Zak, and the CBS News Weekender starts now. Counting by hand. An election board in Georgia says ballots there must be hand tallied. Why this change was implemented, the chaos it could bring, and who plans to appeal.
If this board votes to implement this rule, I think that we put ourselves in legal jeopardy.
And have you heard of sports washing? Critics say Big Oil's marketing is polluting stadiums, games, and merch. We'll check in with our climate team referees. Everything's fine, but it really isn't. It is called glossing, and we're going to explore how toxic positivity is affecting the workplace. And don't doze off on this one. Sleep maxing. People are trying to perfect their sleep and bragging about it on social media. We'll talk to a sleep scientist about the trend and how you can actually sleep better. But we start with the latest on the race for the White House. Georgia's controversial state election board making some major changes to voting in the key battleground state. It's a move that Georgia's Republican Secretary of State and many Democrats say could lead to chaos on election night. On the campaign trail Friday, Vice President Kamala Harris followed a celebrity-packed primetime sit-down with Oprah with stops in Georgia and Wisconsin. She's on her reproductive rights campaign, this time targeting male voters.
When Donald Trump was president, he hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court, the Court of Thurgood and RBG, with the intention that they would overturn the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as he intended, they did. And now more than 20 states have Trump abortion bans.
Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump traveled to a fundraiser in Miami on Friday. He'll be in North Carolina at a rally on Saturday amid the scandal involving the Republican candidate for governor and offensive comments that he allegedly made online. We're going to have more on that story in a moment. Earlier, Trump made headlines at an event in Washington that was aimed at denouncing anti-Semitism. On Thursday, Trump said that if he doesn't win, quote, the Jewish people would have a lot to do with a loss, prompting fears that his words might stoke more anti-Semitism among far-right Trump supporters. And all of that comes as early in-person voting gets underway in Virginia, South Dakota, and Minnesota. Let's bring in Weijia Zhang. She's in Madison, Wisconsin with the Harris campaign. Weijia, Harris is ramping up her messaging on reproductive rights with 2 campaign stops, this time focusing on men. Trump has a big lead with male voters. So how much is this issue expected to help her in the final push towards Election Day?
Well, this has been one of her signature issues since even before she rose to the top of the ticket as vice president when Roe v. Wade was first overturned. That's when we really saw her stepping out and taking ownership on the part of the administration. And her goal now, as we heard in your open, is to remind people as often as possible that it was former President Trump who cleared the way to nominate and then, of course, have those 3 Supreme Court justices contribute to the ultimate decision that has changed the law in so many states. And that is precisely why they spent so much time, so much money, so much effort to remind people because, campaign officials say this is not just an issue that impacts women, but it impacts men because we're talking about fathers and brothers and people who are impacted directly also by reproductive freedoms.
Certainly a part of the equation. Trump is also going to be in Wilmington, North Carolina on Saturday, Weijia. As we're discussing this campaign, tell us how important is that state for him?
Well, it's a state that's important to both of the candidates because it is so competitive and it is so close, quite frankly. And this comes at a pretty perilous time for Trump because that state and his party, the Republicans, are dealing with a controversy that I know that you have been reporting on with the Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who is getting pressure from the party to bow out of the race. So I imagine, Trump will have to answer where he stands on that. He has previously supported Robinson, and so that will be tricky territory for Trump, and precisely why the Harris campaign has already capitalized, launching a brand new ad that shows Trump's former links with Robinson. Lana.
Weijia, let's talk a little bit about Harris and maybe some blowback she might be receiving, because on Thursday in her live stream with Oprah, Harris discussed her gun ownership. I want to play that.
If
And I thought
somebody
that was
breaks in
powerful.
my house, they're getting shot. Here's my point, Oprah, is that I'm not trying to take everyone's guns away. I believe in the Second Amendment, but we have to agree that, look, I did last fall a college tour with college-age young people, and I would ask, please raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. Almost every hand went up. It was bone-chilling.
So the back half of that, stuff that we've heard the vice president say before, but the front part of it, she said, if someone breaks in my house, they're getting shot. This might actually be the first time that many voters are learning that Harris is actually a gun owner herself. How are these comments being received by her base? Is there any concern that it could alienate some Democratic voters?
I think the point here, Lana, and she has said this before, although not that often, she did say it during the presidential debate with Donald Trump. The point is that she wants to dispel misconceptions, that this is an all or nothing issue, that this is a red or blue issue, trying to make the case that, you know, she's not actually trying to get rid of your guns, as the Republicans accuse the Democrats of, because as you heard in this interview and as we've heard before, she is a gun owner, and so is her running mate, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. And so they're trying to make the case that, you know, it's not about gun ownership. It is about the rules surrounding who can own guns, in what instances they should be restricted, and all the regulations surrounding gun ownership. And so I think, you know, the entire point is that, you know, it's not just for Republicans here. And so I don't think that they are concerned about alienating Democrats because, again, most Americans believe that you ought to have the right to own a gun. But, again, it's all the laws surrounding gun ownership where there's a lot of differences.
The idea of common sense. All right. Weijia Jiang out on the campaign trail. Thanks, Weijia. Well, now to the Middle East, where tensions are escalating after the Israeli military carried out a strike in Lebanon's capital Friday. The IDF claims the attack targeted a senior Hezbollah commander. Several bystanders were injured and killed, according to Lebanese health officials. Daniel DeSimone from our partners at the BBC has more details from Beirut.
The Israeli military has said that when it carried out this airstrike today, Ibrahim Akil and other senior Hezbollah commanders were meeting to plot attacks on Israeli citizens, particularly in the north of the country. Earlier this week, the Israeli government set a new war goal: the return home of 60,000 Israelis in the north who have been displaced by rocket fire from Hezbollah. The government's not said exactly how it will achieve this goal, but degrading and weakening Hezbollah is clearly part of it. Since then, we've seen a change in rhetoric. Talk of the war's centre of gravity moving north, of there being a new phase in this conflict. We saw the walkie-talkie and pager explosions in Lebanon, something Israel's neither confirmed nor denied it was involved in, but which it's widely been blamed for. We also saw intensive airstrikes yesterday, and these assassinations today. Hezbollah, for its part, has said it will not stop fighting Israel until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. It fired approaching 200 rockets into Israel today. As we move into the weekend, there are calls for a de-escalation in this conflict from various powers around the world, including the United States. But this week, the trend is not of de-escalation, it's one of escalation. Tonight, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to social media to say, "Our goals are clear and our actions speak for themselves."
Daniel DeSimone in Beirut. Well, later this hour, we're going to take a closer look at the tensions between Israel and Hezbollah. We'll also dive into the FBI's takedown of a Chinese botnet and preview the UN General Assembly. That's all in our weekly national security wrap-up. A new Secret Service report released Friday detailed several communication failures that hindered the agents assigned to protect former President Trump during the July rally where he was wounded. Nicole Skanga has the details.
Acting U.S. Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe facing some tough questions today as he unveiled the internal performance review detailing the Secret Service's response on July 13th during that Butler rally. And he used words like complacent and lack of follow through, as well as not proud, to describe the performance of the United States Secret Service. The internal review noting that advanced personnel and multiple supervisors with oversight recognized there were line-of-sight concerns, but security measures to alleviate those concerns were not carried out as intended. Plus, different radio frequencies were used by law enforcement, none of them conducive to communicating in real time, according to the report. Now, lawmakers are debating what to do if they need to send more money to the U.S. Secret Service in the upcoming government spending bill, or reappropriate funding within the Department of Homeland Security. The House today voting unanimously on a bill that grants the same level of protection as the sitting president to major party candidates and the former president. But that level of protection is something Acting Director Rowe says that Donald Trump already has. All of this coming after 2 assassination attempts on the former president in 9 weeks. And in West Palm Beach, that investigation continues, still trying to pin down a specific motive for the suspect there, as well as a timeline of his travel. Acting Director Ronald Rowe saying today, commending the work of the young agent that first spotted the suspect in the tree line at the golf course in West Palm Beach, announcing that he plans to hire 400 new special agents this year, but still outlining serious recruitment and retention problems for the agency. Lana?
Nicole Skanga, thank you. North Carolina's governor says the Republican running for his position should have resigned years ago. But Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson is refusing to get out of the race amid a swirling controversy over his alleged comments on a porn site. A CNN investigation reports that he used racist and incendiary language online more than a decade ago. Robinson has called the reporting, quote, salacious tabloid trash. CBS News saw Robinson at his home today. He would not answer questions about the controversy. And we have CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian there in Raleigh, North Carolina. So, Nicole, Robinson has flat out denied that he made those comments. How is his rival in the race, North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein, responding?
Well, you know, he was pretty sharply worded. He has basically said that he believes that, Lieutenant Governor Robinson is unfit for the job. And so I asked him today about that, and he said he stands by those comments. Take a listen. You called the lieutenant governor completely unfit. Do you think he should drop out of this race?
I don't think he ever should have run. He is unfit, unsuitable, unqualified to be governor. He says disqualifying things about people. You cannot talk about other human beings the way he does and lead an entire state.
Now, interestingly, even though he does see the lieutenant governor as unfit, he also this week came out saying that he will refuse to debate the lieutenant governor. I asked him if his position on that had changed in light of the allegations, if he feels the need to take the lieutenant governor to task on this, and he said no. And so he doesn't intend to debate him, of course, this being a very heated gubernatorial contest. Also, he denied that anyone from his camp was involved in leaking that explosive story to media outlets like CNN. So that being said, Stein, much like other Democrats in the state, feel that it is time for Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson to go. But Lana, as you made clear, for now, the Lieutenant Governor not backing out of the gubernatorial race.
Well, I'm wondering how former President Trump might play into this, because he previously called Robinson Martin Luther King on steroids. Is he doing anything to either encourage him to exit the race or even distancing himself from the lieutenant governor now?
Well, One way he's kind of distanced himself is by not weighing into this controversy. And, by and large, again, that's kind of been some of the messaging we have heard more so from Democrats, particularly here in the state. And, of course, Vice President Harris released a new ad trying to tie Trump to Robinson. Many Democrats feel that Republicans in this state should say whether or not they stand with the lieutenant governor or not and kind of take a position on this. And the former president is no exception. He will obviously be here in the state Saturday. He has a rally in Wilmington down on the coast. And so, we will see if he brings up the issue. One thing we do know is that the lieutenant governor is not expected to attend. Lana?
Wow. And Trump is going to be there because North Carolina is vitally important in the presidential race. And in fact, we actually have some CBS News polling that finds that Trump and Harris are tied in North Carolina. Might this controversy in the governor's race impact the presidential race?
Well, I think to your point, that is why the former president is largely staying quiet on this. I mean, look, this is a critical state that is part of his strategy. He won it back in 2020. He wants to keep this state in his column. But yes, things have tightened here. And that is one reason why we have seen the former president here numerous times. He's probably been here nearly half a dozen times within, the last couple of weeks. So this is a critical state for the former president and for, the vice president as well. But, that is why the former president is spending a lot of time here, hoping that it makes a difference among voters.
All right, Nicole Killian, thanks. The fossil fuel industry pays sports leagues billions for advertising, and our climate unit looks at the practice that's known as sports washing, the big players, and tells us what it's all about. Plus, a new trend to maximize your sleep is all the rage online. We're going to speak with a sleep scientist about people's quest for a good rest. You're streaming CBS News. The head of the United Nations wants the fossil fuel industry to be banned from advertising, just like the tobacco industry. He argued that burning oil and gas is what drives climate change, which threatens the health and safety of people everywhere, all while the fossil fuel industry makes billions.
Many in the fossil fuel industry have shamelessly greenwashed, even as they have sought to delay climate action with lobbying, legal threats, and massive ad campaigns. And they have been aided and abetted by advertising and PR companies.
Now, 2 new studies are out that look at this role of sports washing, which is fossil fuel advertising and sports sponsorship around the world. And we have national environmental correspondent David Schechter here to talk about it with us. So, David, first off, sports washing as a concept, explain it for us. Why do we use that term? What does it mean?
Hey, Lana. So, in a world where we're inundated with information and devices that are always stealing our attention, sport is one of the few things that can still unite us. Maybe you can't talk to your neighbors or your Uncle Al about politics, but most of us can still talk about football. So sports washing is this idea that oil and gas companies can take advantage of this halo of unity and goodwill that surround your favorite teams. That looks like commercials and in-stadium ads that cast these companies in a favorable light, even though their products are heating up the planet.
Well, one of these new studies is from the New Weather Institute, a UK think tank, and it's I thought it was staggering how much is being spent. It found major oil and gas companies are spending at least $5.6 billion on the sponsorship of global sport across 205 active deals. Which sports, which companies are we really talking about?
Yeah, you're right. It's a ton of money. And globally, the study found the high-profile sports with the most deals are soccer, motorsports, rugby, and golf. The biggest sponsor is the Saudi oil company Aramco. It is the world's most profitable company, and it spends $1.3 billion on sports sponsorships like Formula One racing. Shell also spends $470 million. Total Energy from France spends $340 million.
And another 2024 survey from UCLA, David, found that sponsorship deals across 6 major league sports deals have 61 deals with sponsors that can be considered high-polluting companies. Talk to us about who the big players are, but also I really think that the comparison that the Secretary General made to tobacco industry was really interesting, because here in this country, we don't allow the tobacco industry to advertise in this way anymore, though we did previously. So talk to us about some of those similarities.
Yeah, well, there are no regulations on advertising oil and gas companies. And so if you're watching these games, you might see naming rights on stadiums. You might see patches on players, their sleeves and their jerseys and their helmets. The oil company funding the most sponsorships in the U.S. is Chevron, with 9 deals across baseball, basketball, football, and soccer. The teams include, in baseball, the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. In basketball, the Sacramento Kings and the New Orleans Pelicans. In the NFL, the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. Big picture, the NBA has 14 oil, gas, or utility sponsorships. The NFL has 13. Major League Baseball has 13, 10 in the NHL, and 9 in Major League Soccer. These are the kinds of things, if they were a tobacco company, like you mentioned, like the Secretary General mentioned, they could not do this kind of advertising.
Well, you know, I imagine that there's some people who feel like people are going to advertise sports. If they want to take the money, let's go ahead and let them. I can't imagine that people are actually too concerned when we're talking about these particular organizations that they can't survive financially without sports washing dollars. But I imagine, are there any of these major organizations that would say, that's all right, no thanks, we're all right not taking your money? Are there anybody who are sort of standing on principle on that?
Absolutely. I mean, researchers also say that it is possible to run a sports team without taking this kind of money. There are successful, profitable sports franchises that do not have ties to polluting industries. And, you know, while we talked about 61 sponsorships, and that is significant, and that does change public perception of these companies, it is a very small percentage of the thousands of sponsorship deals in the U.S. All
right, David Schechter, thank you.
Thank you.
45 years after the worst nuclear accident in American history, 3 Mile Island is back. Microsoft announced a new 20-year deal to reopen the dormant nuclear site in Middletown, Pennsylvania. 3 Mile Island's new reactor is expected to be online by 2028 once it gets approval from nuclear regulators. Microsoft's goal is to match the power its data centers use with carbon-free energy. 3 Mile Island's return marks the first time in U.S. history that a nuclear plant has come back into service after being decommissioned. Well, to weather now, thousands across the South and Midwest are feeling a weekend warm-up. For more, here's meteorologist Felicia Combs from our partners at the Weather Channel.
A lot of people asking, where is fall out there? Good evening. Let's talk about it, because we are still just stuck in this stifling heat for a lot of the country, especially across the central states. It is way hotter than it should be. Meanwhile, where we have that dip in the jet stream, it's a little bit cooler. Very different kind of tale of 2 cities, right? We've got those temperatures that are going to be reaching well above average into the mid and upper 90s for places like Dallas and Oklahoma City. Little Rock, same thing for you. It is going to be so hot out there, and it's going to feel even hotter than that. That possibility for severe storms sticking around tomorrow as well. You can see a bullseye here between New Mexico, portions of Texas, and then another area to watch across the upper Mississippi Valley, the northern plains. We're going to have those storms kind of bubbling up. Some very large hail is possible as we head through our Saturday. Some damaging wind gusts as well. So you're going to have to plan your weekend around that. It is going to be a rainy, messy time. And in the meantime, we're watching this area to watch in the Caribbean. It has a medium chance of development. Well, for more in-depth coverage, watch the Weather Channel on cable and now live on your favorite TV streaming devices.
All right, Felicia, thanks. Well, this might be a statistic that surprises you. Americans are sleeping more than at any point in the past 2 decades. That's according to a Washington Post analysis. Better sleep and how to get perfect sleep has actually been trending on social media lately. It is called sleep optimization or sleep maxing. And some of the tips include eliminating distractions, no surprise there. Others are opting for things like jaw straps or mouth tape. You can also see other people providing their favorite devices and such online. And then they all encourage followers to compare their sleep scores. For more on this trend, I want to bring in sleep scientist Vanessa Hill. So first of all, it seems like people have always wanted to sleep better. We are chronically sleep deprived, but there is something different about this trend of not only sharing your tips, but sharing your sleep stats online. What do you make of this new trend?
I mean, personally, I think it's really good when we do have sleep trends like this. It means that people are thinking about their sleep, they're prioritizing their sleep, when often we're not allowing enough time for sleep in our days and we're procrastinating our bedtime and things like that. So I think overall it's good. Sometimes when people can be too perfectionistic about their sleep, it can backfire. Perfect is often the enemy of good. And in that case, if people are stressing about it, if this is causing them more anxiety in terms of comparing scores with other people or trying to do too many things at once, then it may be sensible to take all of the tips with a grain of salt and just back up and do what works best for you.
So it feels like most people now are wearing some sort of device. And I confess, I was wearing a device, and then I would wake up in the morning and I would check to see how I slept. And then I would either feel good or bad based off of what the data said about how I slept. I'm wondering if the pursuit of trying to optimize our sleep has in fact gone too far.
Sometimes it can. Some people really like sleep tracking and it can help them notice patterns over time. For example, going to bed and getting up at the same time, having a consistent sleep schedule is really important for our health. And by tracking your sleep, you can kind of see if you're hitting those goals. But for other people, perhaps it is not for you, particularly if you are a bit more anxious or get stressed about scores and trying to be a perfectionist. So in that case, it might be better to just go analog and not track your sleep. Always worth trying if you're curious, but there's no yes or no that you should or shouldn't track your sleep. Just do what works for you.
I think, Vanessa, you've got me nailed, because I, of course, am going to want to get the best score every single time.
Of course, me too.
But I like your point that all of us are individuals, and what we need and how we achieve our best sleep may change. But I'm wondering if there are some things that are sort of universal. Is there something that you can tell us about how much sleep that we actually need and what people should actually do if they're having issues with their sleep?
Yeah, of course. One of my favorite things about the sleep maxing trend is that it is repopularizing some aspects of sleep hygiene. So things like try not to use your devices for half an hour or so before bed. Try to stick to a consistent bedtime. Try to have a relaxing wind down routine. All of these things can set us up for a good night's sleep, and it's nice to see those popularized. The recommended amount of sleep is 7 to 9 hours. Sometimes people will need more or less than that, depending on their age and other factors. If you are having trouble with your sleep, always worth discussing it with a medical professional. TikTok is not the answer when you really do have a problem, and there are a lot of sleep problems out there as well.
Good to know that TikTok is not a doctor. All right, Vanessa Hill, very much appreciate talking to you.
Thank you.
Well, Houthi rebels claim they sunk a U.S. aircraft carrier. The only problem, the ship is still afloat, and her captain has a lot to say about it. CBS Confirmed is on the story. We will bring it to you after the break. Welcome back to The Weekender. I'm Lana Zak. Here's a look at some of the stories that we're following. The FTC is suing 3 companies over high insulin prices. It says United Healthcare's Optimum RX, CVS Caremark, and Cigna's Express Scripts have been excluding low-cost drugs from their products list in order to drive patients to higher-priced ones. Those 3 companies deliver 80% of all prescriptions in the U.S. Testimony continued in hearings over the Titan submersible disaster and safety questions surrounding the company that owned it. A passenger who was supposed to go on an expedition in 2021 testified his trip was aborted due to mechanical issues with the vessel. The Titan exploded last year on its way to the Titanic wreckage. All 5 passengers on board died. A Secret Service report is highlighting several failures leading up to the attempted assassination against Donald Trump in July. It details communication issues at the Butler, Pennsylvania site, including the fact that officers were relying on mobile devices to transmit information instead of the Secret Service's own communication network. Election officials in Georgia held a day-long meeting Friday. The state's conservative board considered election rule changes just weeks before early voting starts in the Peach State. David Becker joins me now with more. He's a CBS News election law contributor and the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. So, David, the board met for most of the day Friday. It imposed a rule ordering the hand counting of ballots on election night. Talk to us about why they would make this change, because in so many ways, this feels like going backward in time. What is it all going to mean on election night?
So first of all, we should understand what the change actually is. In every single precinct in the state of Georgia, the board has imposed this rule that says they have to count the number of ballots before they go home, not the actual votes on each ballot, but the number of ballots before they go home that night after a very long day. The poll workers will have been working there 16 or more hours. Many of those poll workers are senior citizens, and they'll be kept until they count in multiple times the number of pieces of paper. They'll be tired. They will be exhausted after a long day. And we know human beings, even in the best circumstances, don't count thousands of pieces of paper very accurately. So it's likely there are going to be some disparities. Now, we have to understand also, this rule was passed 3-2 on a strictly partisan basis. And the Attorney General of the state of Georgia just yesterday, a Republican as well, told the board that this rule, as well as others they were considering, were well outside the scope of their authority, that they did not comply with Georgia law. The board passed them anyway, despite a lot of testimony from Georgians and others that this was going to cause problems. And I'm not so worried that this is going to lead to any problem with the actual vote tally in Georgia. Georgia's going to do a good job with that. But you can imagine how these long nights where they're going to be counting the number of ballots, if there's even a disparity of one, how the loser of the election might spread lies about that to make it appear as if there was something wrong with the actual vote count.
Well, and David, we know that there were already some issues in Georgia. You mentioned the AG, Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who was famously part of some of those discussions last time. He told the state election board that these new rules are dangerously late in the election process and most likely illegal. What legal action do you expect will come from his office, from the AG's office?
Well, he's exactly right. And it should be noted, the Governor Kemp, Attorney General Carr, Secretary of State Raffensperger have stood with great courage, actually, for principle and conviction and for the people of the state of Georgia throughout this entire process. And he's also very right that county election officials in Georgia's 159 counties are very busy preparing for the election, which is only 46 days out. This is going to be very difficult for them to implement. They're going to have to train poll workers to do something they've never done before. And there could be significant problems as a result of this. I'm still confident Georgia's elections will be very secure and verifiable. But that said, given the Attorney General's opinion, I think we should absolutely expect that there will be a lawsuit filed very quickly. I think that lawsuit will be on very strong ground. We'll see how it's decided. I think it's going to be decided under Georgia state law and the Georgia state courts most likely. And hopefully they'll act swiftly, because the counties, the professionals in each county, need time to prepare and plan during these last 46 days to make sure there's no voter confusion and no election official poll worker confusion.
All right, David Becker, thank you.
Thank you.
As we mentioned, Israel launched a strike Friday on a southern neighborhood in Lebanon's capital city of Beirut. The Israeli military says the attack killed a Hezbollah commander and 10 operatives with the Iranian-backed group. And the strike comes just days after pagers and walkie-talkies carried by members of Hezbollah exploded, killing dozens and injuring thousands. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins us now for our weekly national security wrap-up. So, Sam, the situation in the Middle East is constantly changing. What have we learned about this latest string of military action taken by Israel, and how much they are actually saying they are doing and looking to do?
Well, Lana, the backdrop here, of course, is that Israel and Hezbollah have been engaged in a series of cross-border strikes since Hamas's terrorist attack against Israel on October 7th. This week, the situation escalated further. In what was likely a months-long intelligence operation, Israel was reportedly able to physically sabotage Hezbollah's communications devices, both pagers and walkie-talkies. Then, in a coordinated fashion this week in two stages, Israel reportedly was able to detonate these communications devices, leaving 37 dead and thousands injured. Following that disruption to Hezbollah's communications devices, Israel then on Friday launched a targeted airstrike that reportedly killed a leader of Hezbollah's Radwan group, one of their special forces group, an individual named Ibrahim Akil, who has been wanted by the United States for his role in bombings of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut and Marine barracks in the 1980s. Now, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, had said that Israel's actions constitute a declaration of war, and all are waiting to see whether Hezbollah has both the intent and the capabilities to escalate tensions with Israel further in retaliation for the actions this week, Lana.
All right, Sam, there is a lot happening in the world. The FBI say they took down a Chinese botnet that infiltrated hundreds of thousands of devices. Chinese leaders, other world leaders, all heading here to the United States, to New York specifically, for the United Nations General Assembly. Tell us what you're going to be looking out for.
Well, when the UN General Assembly, or UNGA, kicks off next week, more than 140 heads of state are expected in New York, not to mention many ministers, private sector CEOs, and more. President Biden is due to speak at the UN General Assembly on Wednesday, and member states will be giving speeches over the course of 6 days. The theme of this year's UN General Assembly is leaving no one behind. There will be a summit for the future that focuses on complex global challenges like inequality and poverty. There will be a summit of the Global Coalition to address synthetic drug threats, and a very heavy focus on the war in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and likely on issues like climate change. We understand that after President Biden leaves New York, he will host President Zelensky of Ukraine at the White House on Thursday. And I'll be looking to see whether there is any progress made on the war in the Middle East, the situation in Ukraine, and whether world leaders are actually able to come together to make actionable commitments to key global challenges, Lana.
All right, Sam Vinograd, thank you.
Thanks.
The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower is safe and sound on America's shores after 9 months protecting shipping lanes in the Red Sea. Now, during that historic deployment, Houthi rebel groups claim to have struck and sunk the carrier at least twice, but want to show you, there it is. As you can see, it wasn't sunk. The simplest way to debunk these claims come from the ship itself. Courtesy of the skipper, Captain Christopher Hill. Here's Major Garrett with the story.
On board the USS Eisenhower, Captain Chris Chowda Hill shares snapshots of life from the iconic vessel.
That's a good boy, right there. There we go.
Nicknamed the Ike.
Which coffee you gonna get?
We get a chai tea latte. I got the pink lemonade.
It's part of a strategy to subtly, playfully, and effectively undermine false claims from Houthi rebels about attacks on the aircraft carrier. Let's go back to May 31st of this year. The Houthi rebels sent out a false claim saying the ship was hit and burning in the Red Sea. But when you check the captain's X account, the only fire on the ship was in the bakery, without even a burnt pastry in sight. Houthi leaders made the Eisenhower the target of a disinformation campaign, using digitally altered satellite imagery and video game footage to fake attacks. These false posts have been spread on dozens of accounts, racking up thousands of views. CBS News confirmed analyzed some of the footage and traced it back to the popular military video game Arma 3. The game's developers said it's been fighting an uphill battle to get the use of their footage taken down. The false claims of attacks spread the same way most disinformation does: bad actors with big platforms. They are amplified and circulated online. The goal? Raise the group's legitimacy, hoping to reach global media networks. That's where Captain Hill comes in.
Thank you for volunteering.
His frequent posts signaled to the world the Ike was still afloat and unharmed, while simultaneously protecting the real possible victims of this disinformation, the loved ones, of the 5,000 American service members who call the ship home. The captain is sending a simple but loud message to the sailors' loved ones back on shore. We are here. We are safe. We are coming home.
Well, if you ever feel like the world is on fire, but you have to put a smile on your face, the next story is for you. We're going to talk about why glossing, a form of toxic positivity, might actually lead to major problems at the workplace. So stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. If you've ever felt like you are in a dumpster fire, but everyone around you is smiling and feels really unfazed by the chaos, you might have experienced something called glossing. According to Business Insider, glossing is, quote, a form of toxic positivity in which people suppress and deny their negative emotions. Dr. Thea Gallagher joins us now. She's a clinical psychologist and associate professor at NYU Langone Health. It is great to be with you. It's so much fun to talk about this topic of glossing. But I have to confess to you, I've always believed in the idea of fake it till you make it, even if things seem like they are rough right now. Smile and the world will smile with you. Why is that maybe some bad advice?
Well, I think we're starting to realize the more you suppress the reality or you suppress the emotions that you're actually experiencing, the more stress you're going to experience. And it could lead to higher rates of burnout. So it's really important, I think, to have more of a radical honesty approach to work and to our relationships, where, yes, we want to appreciate and practice gratitude and think about the things that are going well. But it's really important also to highlight and identify the things that might not be going great. And if your leadership is saying to you, everything is fine, but you're experiencing a different reality, it's really important to talk about those things and look at it like any other relationship. We need collaboration, we need communication, we need to have tough conversations. And so it's really important in making our relationships to work better as well.
So help us sort of distinguish between positivity and optimism and gratitude and toxic positivity in the workplace.
Yeah, so we know that our brains work in a fashion that when we're very highly critical, right, we can find something that's not working pretty easily. And so it's really important that we do try to think about things that are going well. And sometimes that's a good resetting point in your life to say, okay, what is going well? Because sometimes the critical nature of our minds can find everything's a problem. But now on the other end, sometimes if you're trying to make things so positive and you're just continuing to think about just the things that are going well, you might not be considering what could be changed, what could be changed for the better. Nothing should stay the same, nothing should stay stagnant. So it's really important to have these tough conversations and also an opportunity to say, hey, I'm not feeling great doing this project or working on this thing or even the work culture itself. We spend so much time at work. It's really important that we have more of an honest relationship and that we look at our relationship to the workplace just like we would look at our relationship to a long-term partner.
See, I really love that point about glossing and saying everything's fine when there are things that can be improved. Leave something on the table. So how can companies try and foster an environment where employees are coming up with creative ideas about how to share their true feelings, about how to make the workplace a place where everybody, in fact, does feel more productive, does feel better about doing the work that they're doing?
It's similar to the advice I would give a couple as well. Trying to create like a standing time in your week where you talk about what's going well and what's not going so well. Because sometimes we wait until it's too late, right? Somebody has an exit interview or there's something like a town hall where everyone's airing their grievances. And then all of a sudden it's just like all the negativity at once. If you create a space weekly, if you can, or use part of your faculty or your staff meeting to really talk about what's going well and what can be improved upon that. And we know even in our relationships, right, when we have these tough conversations, they can lead to greater connection, greater intimacy, and in the workplace, leading to greater productivity and just greater satisfaction and quality of life. We know it's really important for people to feel satisfied at work so that we are avoiding things like quiet quitting or burnout.
All right, Professor Thea Gallagher, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, from glossing to quiet quitting, new workplace lingo has made a big splash in the headlines, but a recent survey from Glassdoor is highlighting some of the worst examples of office jargon. Number one on the list, We're building the plane as we fly it. That's followed by, let's double click on that, and let me circle back with you. One respondent also suggested that we stop using the word bandwidth altogether. Let me know what you really hate. Circle back to me, won't you? Still ahead. Scientists are now displaying a new dinosaur species that they have nicknamed Natalie. You'll never guess why. We'll be right back. You're streaming CBS News. Can you believe the first iPhone came out 17 years ago? Now the latest version is here, and Apple says the iPhone 16 will have the longest battery life of any iPhone. It comes with a 30% faster chip to support AI software. They also have all these new products. And we want to tell you about this story. After 17 years of excavation, paleontologists are ready to showcase what may be a new dinosaur species. The Natural History Museum in Los Angeles features this green-colored dino named Natalie, spelled with a G, due to the storm of gnats that plagued the dig. Natalie gets her color from the riverbed minerals, and she is currently the only green-colored fossil on the planet. Up next, we have highlights of the Daily Report with John Dickerson. You are streaming CBS News 24/7.